Yeah, somebody.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Nancy Knowles and I'm helping out with the Art Center East writing project tonight. It's my pleasure to mention that Art Center East is a 501c3 nonprofit located here in LeGrand at the Carnegie Library building on Penn Avenue. And the Art Center is a member-supported nonprofit, and we really love to do work in the community and to be supported by our many members who access the arts in so many ways. We're also very proud of our artists, our writers, our creative folks who are participating in delivering activities and offering classes. And our big event coming up really soon is the Dia de los Muertos celebration happening at the Art Center on Friday evening next week. So we hope those of you that are here in town can come and join in that event. I also want to acknowledge that we work and live and play on the lands belonging to the Cayuse, Umatilla, Walla Walla, and Nez Perce people. And we feel a deep obligation to learn from them and to uplift the voices of our tribal partners in the work that we do. So definitely want to acknowledge our location. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Amelia Diaz-Edinger, who will introduce our featured reader for tonight. Welcome, Amelia.
Thank you, everybody, for being here, and those of you online, hi. Thanks a lot for being here. It's my great pleasure tonight to introduce you to my good friend and co-editor of Early Press, Connie Soper. Connie is an amazing hiker. She has that's one of the pleasures in her life is hiking on the Oregon coast and around Oregon. And she has a book, a nonfiction book also on hiking the coastal range. This beautiful edition, A Story Interrupted, is her first collection of poetry. Connie is a poet and hiker who finds inspiration by walking along the beach and composing poems in her head. She's the author of a nonfiction book that I just mentioned. The title is Exploring the Oregon Coast Trail. And currently she's working on a second collection of poetry. She divides her time between Portland, where she has a wonderful, very welcoming home, and in Manzanita, Oregon, where she has also a beautiful, welcoming home. Thank you so much. Here I have Connie.
Thank you, Amelia. As Amelia mentioned, my first book of poetry, A Story Interrupted, was recently published by Early Press. And one reason for the title of the book is that some of the poems in this book were written over 25 years ago. And then I had a long break when I wasn't writing poetry and resumed a few years ago and included some of those early poems in this collection. And as I was thinking tonight about how to organize my reading, I didn't get very far. I don't have any logic to the way I'm going to be reading the poems, other than to say that I hope to capture some of the themes in the book about family, memory, a sense of place, especially in Oregon and the coast, and the influence of some of my travels. I'm often inspired by my travels and write about them. So I'll get started. The poem I'm going to start with and end with are actually not in the book, but I wanted to read them anyway. They're both memories of my childhood and in particular of my mother. So I'm going to just read it, start off the reading that way, called The Way It Happened. She tells again how we put on Sunday school clothes and walk into town, crossing railroad tracks that stitched a black seam next to the sawmill. The Emporium opened double glass doors like a party invitation to a world gleaming with polished counters and faux crystal chandeliers. Cash registered zinging. Swanky, she'd say, duck and duckling, we glided among aisles of books, toys, watches, and wallets, lingered at the perfume station where white-gloved ladies arranged exotic vials, missed the French lavender cologne on our wrists for free. Mannequins looked down from the mezzanine, fixing plastic gazes as if they had somewhere better to be. They glowed in the haloed light, soft as pale yellow cashmere. With nothing to spend, we peered into tableau windows wrapping around the corner. Our reflections stared back against a backdrop of bald hills, scarred by clear cuts. Behind those hills, a road led away from there. And like the push-pull of tides feeding stagnant flats, I wanted to leave, I wanted to stay. I could tell her that store is long gone now. The theater with its grand marquee of Starbucks. The sky still lowers its gray mass, same sulfurous smell. What is memory anyway but half-invented truths? So I nod yes, yes, when my mother recalls those days, her pleasure for that place we came from. Yes, I say, that's the way it happened. And here is another poem about her that's more recent, called Kodachrome. And anybody who's had to move a parent into from their home into assisted living or help them downsize may relate to this. Kodachrome. Limp and unsnappable, these rubber bands no longer bundle letters and photographs scattered on the vacant bedroom floor. Snapshots pried from frames, overstuffing shoe boxes. Rome over there, next to the pile of Paris. Here she is, serenaded by a gondolier, eating tapas in Barcelona, or was it Madrid, Seville? Our mother never emptied a single cupboard or drawer. The faux fireplace with its switch-on flame won't burn these photos. Too many for her one room at the care center. We don't know which she wants, what she remembers. Heavy-duty plastic bags destined for landfill's graveyard overwhelm the dumpster with faded images of eternal cities with bridges. Always a river, always a bridge. Our mother's face, young and smiling, as she enters some great and beautiful cathedral, posing from the other side of the camera with a look that says, I am here. About a year ago, I had an opportunity to travel to Iceland to explore my heritage. My great-grandmother emigrated from Iceland, and I wrote several poems that are in the book about that, and this is one of them. It's called The Herring Girls, and it's based on my experience visiting the Herring Museum in Iceland. That was a factory for preparing herring to be exported all over the world. And between 1903 and 1969, young women came from all over Iceland to Sigli Theodore, I hope I pronounced that right, where they prepared fish for exporting. But in 1969, the herring failed to appear due to years of overfishing. And for many of these young women, it was their first opportunity to be away from home and to make money on their own. And they lived in dormitories in this town, which have been, and that place has been left exactly the way it was when it closed down in 1969. We left our father's lowland farms, red roof barns, horses grazing the tundra for bounty of the North County. Here, fish undulate in schools so thick, we lean off the boat to touch them. Herring ripple silver bridges by the nautical mile, pulsing waves of their own making. We are something now. Every day we stand on the docks waiting for boats to arrive. Ready in our oilskin aprons, hands quick and sure as we hack heads off the life that had just been swimming. Chuck guts to cats prowling the wharf. Salted, pickled, smoked, brine. We pack those fish into coopered barrels by the ton. Our work, the pride of a country. Piers are stacked with crates higher than our reach. Floes carved by ancient glaciers drift in the fjord, veined with filaments of palest blue. All around us, industry's urgent hum, an abundance hauled into nets for the taking. Endless hours lit by a midnight sun, the fish forever running. The art of careful pruning. The leaves have grown too dense, touching roofs, stealing light from the windows. The neighbor and I want them tamed, but not too much. The tree trimmer nods, having heard this before. He says it's for hire, notch by notch. He cinches the buckle on his harness and shimmies up the tree. Lean and supple as a birch, he carries an uncommon strength in his shoulders. He surveys the uncut canvas of this job, arranging the shades of green with clips from his tool. Every limb he shaves drops the sky a little closer. From my window, I watch the neighbor water to the edge of his property, his spotted dog barking at the base of the tree. Ours is not a boundary of substance. What's his is his, and his is there, and mine is here. He glances up as if he hears me think. What does he see? A woman writing at a table, crossing tasks off her list. We need these trees, need the tangle of new growth to obscure the ordinary, even as we cut it back, again and again. This poem is called My Grandmother's China. My mother gives me her mother's china, handed down through a chain of daughters, and with it the story of its luxury. I hear all over again how my grandmother made do, nothing afforded for the sake of beauty, but for this china, bought at the Bon Marché with 3 years of savings. We boxed saucers, nest teacups to protect them from chipping. I have no use for egg coddlers, soup tureen, fragile cups with tiny handles. No room for them in my cupboards. My extravagance is something different altogether. Give me a substantial cup, something to wrap my whole hand around in the morning, like this one, bought at the Oregon coast, where I watched the miracle of whales breaching, or these carried home from Oaxaca, Umbria, Santa Fe. Somewhere in Vermont, a mug baked in a kiln to the color of autumn leaves. When I drink from it, I smell the earth and the loam and the clay. Wedgwood, my mother says, and runs her fingers around the gold rim. She recalls again her mother's pleasure at setting these dishes on a crocheted tablecloth, elegant as an English garden, lively with red peonies, climbing rose, and lavender butterflies. She extends the box to me, and I take it. So as Amelia mentioned, I'm a hiker, and I especially like hiking on the Oregon coast. And one of my favorite hikes along the Oregon Coast Trail is called Amanda's Trail, which is near Yachats. And this trail was named for a Coos woman who in 1864 was removed from her home and separated from her child and forced to walk 50 miles to be located at the Coast Reservation near Yachats, what is now Yachats, Oregon. And I think it was the 1980s, a forest ranger heard her story, and he was working on a trail on Cape Perpetua and named it after her. And this is a very special place now. It's a place of remembrance for the coastal tribes and what they went through to be forcibly removed from their homes. And it's now a place of remembrance. Amanda's Trail. It was her way to embrace circles of seasons in an abundance of bulbs, roots, berries, to harvest mussels in the low and salty estuary, until she became a refugee in her own homeland. It was her way to lay the dead in canoes hung from branches, always facing west. Those boats would sway in the breeze as souls rode into the next world. Which of us wouldn't enter eternity like that? It was her way to leave gifts for that long journey, basket, knife, blanket, until those gifts were stolen for souvenirs. It was her way to trust the shaman until the diseases came and there were no more living to tend to the dying. Today, we lace our boots and ready packs to step into forests, ripe and sudden smell on the flanks of Cape Perpetua. The same cliffs, chasms, streams, rocks, the same churning waves in the distance. The path before us curves like the parentheses of history. We can't see its end as we cross over a bridge, traverse switchbacks, follow twisting trail to pause at a knoll overlooking the expanse of sea. Cedars press green spirit weave against the sky, dappled with light, rooted in darkness. And this poem, the next two poems I'm going to read were inspired by my travels. This one called In the Commonwealth was written after a visit to Madison's home in Montpelier, Virginia. Perfect green hillocks rise between hedgerows amid stands of black walnut. Cedars of Lebanon, seated in France, still thrive on the mansion grounds. Fence slats define a pastoral tableau. Horses, descendants perhaps from DuPont's stables, fatten in the field as they consider tourists with bucolic indifference. We cross the mowed path to the portico strung with Roman columns. In the dining room, cardboard cutouts form an animated theater around the table. Jefferson, Franklin, Jackson, dawdling with her teacup. Madison's manservant stands in the corner, holding a tray. Paul Jennings, sold for $200 in 1846. Imagine the conversations, the docent says, a polite discourse of gentle persuasion. Up the carpeted stairs, pink block walls adorned with ornamental sconces. To the library replete with books by learned men. Supple leather spines suffused with warm shades of butter, bourbon, cherry. In this very room, Madison conjured a republic born of ideals, plucked from the measured words of poets and philosophers. Here he overlooked blue ridge vistas, fertile soil, and great expanse of his plantation, all that he owned. And this poem was written for a visit in northern England at the Corbridge Roman Museum, which is an amazing place where you can go and visit and see where the Romans had set up a town. Archaeology. Cropped paths maze the curated grounds past reconstructed stone walls, aqueduct and ancient granary to River Tyne, where Romans bathed. Picture placards reimagine the city, its tranquil industry after the conquest. Timelines on the museum wall catalog inventions of war. Spear, sword, catapult, pistol. Weapons arranged under glass cases like fine works of art. Caltrops, hand-forged to hobble enemy cavalry, resemble huge jacks, a children's game. Arrowheads unearthed from the dig and still lashed to their spears. Crafted chamfron to protect a horse's head. Copper filament twisted into shapes of dolphins and eagles. How beautiful and bronze they must have looked. Men and horses decorated in battle costumes, adorned with belts, straps, and slides, ornamental buttons and hip fasteners. All those shiny objects glittering in the sun as they rode away. So everybody who's been writing poetry in the past few years has probably written some poems about the pandemic. And I am going to read a couple of them that were actually inspired by visits to national parks. And the first one is about Joshua Tree National Park, which I wrote when I read about that when the park was closed, people were driving through there anyway, cutting new roads, cutting down trees, and caused a lot of damage to the park when it was closed. It really made me mad, so I wrote this poem about that. Anthem. Bend to one knee or stand with hand over heart. Sing an anthem or don't voice one at all. Just claim this desert as your own, with its hard white light and punishing heat. Claim the boulders tumbled into a wonderland, baked to umber and ochre, until the sun dissolves into the washes and fissures, and nothing is the same, but nothing has changed. Name the Joshuas for that seeker of the promised land who raised his hands in prayer. Praise your own God or worship the dogma of the sun. Tell me how you cherish this creation as it is meant to be, unviolated and whole. Allow yourself to tremble within the holy soul of the Mojave, gobsmacked, humbled, unbruised. And so this one's a little bit of a happier poem. I read that when they closed Yosemite National Park to visitors, all the animals came out and were just kind of lounging around on the roads and in the streets, and they were just frolicking and having a great time. And it inspired this poem called "In the Kingdom of Animals." They emerged from forest brush and leafy fringe. Fox, deer, bobcat, coyote, jigsaw of creatures hiding in plain sight, camouflaged within branches and the red bark of ancient sequoias. One by one, two by two, as if freed from the ark, hopscotching from base of great granite walls to the wet groves reborn with California poppies. The black bear wades a glacier melt stream, shakes her fur coat, tosses wet rainbows into air. She lays massive paws on the warm paved road, listens to nothingness, licks meal of anthills with her long pink tongue, intuits perhaps an amen gratitude beyond her foraging snout, joy tooth sharp and tender, reclaiming the kingdom. And I'm going to read a few beach poems, as Amelia mentioned, that I love to spend time at the coast, and it's true. I write poems in my head as I'm going for walks on the beach. And so I'm just going to read a few that are in the book. One day in July. Others before us set bottles along the sill. We opened the cabin door to step inside a great green shine. Wine bottles lined up like backbones, spine of the house. They collect the morning light, then distribute it. Kaleidoscope of blue awash with gold. No corner unlit. All day we drink from the borrowed well of that light as if sourcing never-ending summer. It finds me reading in a rocking chair. You rinsing our cups at the sink. Finds us still and in motion as stars ready themselves for whatever comes next. How many ways to see it? Nothing lasts. Not the long arc of this day, not the smell of grass and smoke caught in your shirt. Here we are bumping into tomorrow. Last pour from the bottle. Enormous view, swoop of waves, sickle moon unhooking the soft fabric of sky. Nastaka spit. September's gone, drifting into a season measured by what's lost or missing. Light, leaves, summer's long dreams. Blackberries shrivel on unruly vines, late for picking. We too are dying a little more. No cure but to hike the long strand of beach straddling ocean and bay. The spit brushed in its own barren beauty. Hillocks, dunes, seagrass swaying brown upon brown. Shore pines lean into their wind-sculpted shapes. Kelp and foam, script and alphabet on blank slate of sand while the bay, fed by a river, nourishes wetlands behind the dunes. Amorphous drizzle materializes from nothing. Within our bodies, organs swell and recede in the rhythm of salty currents, coming to rest against the shore of ribcage, persuaded perhaps by the same celestial power pulling these tides. Tonight, a harvest moon will blaze its apple sweet light over and into the living waves, fill in what's left of our footprints. Land ends where the churning channel begins. No boat to row, too wild to swim. January, one of my favorite months of the coast. Most people like to go in the summer. I like it in the winter. Gray whales have migrated south, singing their way into Baja's lagoons. Having now, they renew their enormous kind. It's the season of king tides and a blood moon, of fleece coats and wool caps. Trees etch a darker horizon, bare but for branches clothed in moss, centuries of the gateway of town. Windshield wipers syncopate a slower rhythm. Puddles reflect the sky, the upside of looking down. The village settles into the comfort of its own bones, shaking the final dregs of summer. Lamps are lit in the old cottages along the ridge. Beach umbrellas hibernate in sheds, and the bright flame of crocosmia is extinguished. Locals have returned to the cafe, knocking wet sand from their boots. Not much to spend here but time, those precious coins spilling freely. Winter sun unlocks a softer light over scrub of seagrass and low dunes, over the long sleeve of shore. 3 miles to the jetty, uninterrupted but for creeks ending their journeys. Dogs run unleashed, spray of salt, frost on sand, prospect of a proper storm. And my last poem, as I mentioned, is one that's not in my book, but it is a theme of a lot of the poems in my book about this, a sense of place and belonging and where I'm from. So that's what it's called, Where I'm From. I come from many places, and all of them live in me still. Now I know that when you leave a place, it doesn't leave you. California, Athens, Hamburg, this shoreline I walk every day. I'm from there. I am descended from a blue-eyed people, sturdy stock who left their homes so I could find mine, who sailed away willingly, without regret. Their seascape belongs to me now, passed down like a genetic geography, an ancestral visitation. Here's the family tree with names of those I never knew, who died by suicide, alcohol, or just worn out like unwound clocks. Sometimes I shake the branches of that tree, hoping to find a secret liaison, smoky love in a Parisian cafe. But I come from a country of women who canned peaches and jam, pickled beets, glued what was broken. Women who left North Dakota, Idaho, and Saskatchewan to follow their fathers, marry their husbands. I carry the dust of those places too. I am the daughter, the granddaughter, the great-granddaughter of women who never spoke of loss, who settled into their lives wherever they were, even if they wanted to leave, who moved on, even if they wanted to stay. Thank you.
Thanks, Connie. That was beautiful. We're going to transition into an open mic. So give us about 5 minutes to get the transition going, and then. Yeah, thanks, Amelia. Okay. Yeah, do we have questions for Connie? And I'm gonna, Connie, I think what I'll do, if you wouldn't mind standing back here, I'm just gonna monitor the online folks. See if we have any questions in the chat. So did folks have questions about Connie's work? Yeah, Nick.
Curious if you could say more or have thought about the relationship between poetry and walking, and whether you speak directly about that connection or it just confuses your work. Can you hear me?
You asked about the connection between poetry and walking.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I read the one poem about Amanda's Trail, but I actually had quite a few poems in the book just about hiking and about and building trails and the significance of trails. So to me, you know, there's a direct connection between you know, I don't know, my love of being in nature that way, and that inspires me to write poems.
Additional questions? Yeah, Ryan.
Well, I really like the poems that you started and ended with, and so I'm curious why those didn't appear in the collection. And then my second part to that question is, can you talk a little bit about how you organize the poems in the manuscript? You said some of them were written 25 years ago, and then there was a break in between. And I'm really curious about how you decided to sequence them.
Well, to answer your first question, why those poems weren't included in the book, that's because they were written after the book was completed, so they're fairly new poems. Hopefully they'll be in a future collection. And yeah, as far as at organizing the poems, that was a real challenge. I tried to mix it up. I have some ekphrastic poems. I don't think I read any of those tonight. Some that are based on art or photographs. some, as I mentioned, based on my connection with nature or walking, family memories. I don't know, there was no real logic in the way I organized. I tried to mix it up so that there was, each section of the book had some of each.
Yes.
What got you into writing? Like what inspired you to become a writer?
Well, gosh, I guess I first started writing pretty bad poetry when I was in college. And took some classes and then over the years, I became more involved with writing communities by taking classes and workshops and being in a critique group. And, you know, one thing kind of led to another.
Yeah.
Talk about your writing process a little bit. You said that sometimes you write poems in your head when you're walking along the coast. Is that kind of your norm or talk about your process?
Yeah, I wish I had a norm or, you know, I wish I had more discipline than I do. I know a lot of people believe in the exercise of just sitting down and writing something every day. I've not really, to be quite honest, been able to do that. Something needs to generate a spark or an idea for me. And then you know, and then I guess my process is to kind of free write, you know, just let it out, you know, put down imagery, ideas, words that I like, and then eventually hopefully it'll take the format of something I'm happy with.
Great. Other questions? Yeah.
Follow-up question. So when you start that process, how long does it usually take to, I mean, I'm sure it varies, but do you usually get something, a draft in a day, or does it take, is it something you have to come back to?
Oh, no, I come back to it. I usually start by handwriting in a notebook and then put it onto the computer and print it off, revise it, print it off, you know, sometimes many times. If I'm lucky or if I'm, you know, inspired, it'll be, you know, maybe, excuse me, not too many revisions.
Is that process the same from when you write in a notebook versus when a poem comes to you while you're walking? Do you still?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, you know, that when I'm walking and a poem comes to me, it's more like an idea or an image, or I see something and then I'll go back and make a note of it.
Lindsay says, I love her imagery, especially the landscape and critters imagery. A comment from our online listeners. Additional questions? Yeah, Nick.
Is there a connected community of poets up and down the coast, or is it fairly localized in your experience?
Is there a community of poets?
Up and down the Oregon coast? Or is it fairly-
Well, I don't know. I live in Portland, and so I'm not totally connected with it. Although I have taken workshops through the Hoffman Center, which is an art center in Manzanita, and there's a very active writing community there, which I presume is the case up and down the coast, but I don't really know.
All right, well, if there are no further questions, let's give Connie another round of applause. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's take just a 5-minute break. For folks who are here in the building, Connie has copies of her book for sale. And also I'm sure Jesse has additional libations for those of you that maybe didn't get any on the way in or would like a refill. So feel free, and we'll be right back.